Alright, it's time to take a look at how the engineer Shortbow performs in the open world. But we're not gonna make yet another Mechanist build. Not that those don't work, in fact, they're great for fighting champions while staying at a distance. But we're gonna take a look at Holosmith instead. Shortbow comes with a few weaknesses, but none that can be overcome. Much like Warrior Staff, the damage modifiers aren't all that great, which does make sense, because the weapon would be way too powerful. To resolve this, we'll use Jadebot protocols so that we get every boon at the start of a fight. The second weakness are its relatively long cooldowns, and this is where Holosmith comes into play, as we can enter Photon Forge every time our Shortbow skills are on cooldown. But there is another reason why we want to use this elite spec, as our toolbelt skills will allow us to deal massive damage on very short cooldowns, which will help supplement Shortbow's lower damage. Before we get to that, let's take a look at the traits first. Explosives will ensure that our first attack when entering combat explodes, inflicts vulnerability for every explosion that lands, and increase strike damage based on the stacks of vulnerability our enemy has. This will synergize well with the auto attack, which inflicts one additional stack of vulnerability, and aim assisted rocket, one of our major traits, will fire exploding rockets every time we fire a missile. And the other traits will increase our damage for being above 75% HP, as well as when we have a higher percentage HP than our target. For group content, we would typically pick firearms for the second trait line to reach 100% critical hit chance. But for the open world, I prefer tools instead, which will help reduce our toolbelt skills recharge, cleanse conditions, grant vigor, and increases our damage for simply having this boon. Static Discharge, one of the major traits, will also fire a bolt of lightning every time we use a toolbelt skill, and when we use 5, we grant ourselves quickness and super speed. And Takedown Rounds will give us another flat damage increase for not being at full endurance, giving us an incentive to dodge enemy attacks or the red circles on the ground. That brings us to Holosmith and their Photon Forge, which is kind of like a Necromancer Shroud but in reverse. Instead of having to build life force, we can go into Forge mode immediately, but we build up heat as long as we maintain it. When the heat bar is full, we will overheat, so we want to jump out before that happens. And once outside of Forge mode, our heat will slowly dissipate. This might not sound all that fun, but we do get a significant damage bonus based on our current heat level, and we get healed for every unit of heat that dissipates. Our major traits will add super speed and cleanse movement impairing conditions when we use skill 2 in Forge mode, and allow us to cleanse conditions every time we exit Forge mode. And our Grandmaster trait will increase our maximum heat capacity by 50%, while also buffing our utility skills. And speaking of the utility skills, they are somewhat set in stone, as they will directly decide which toolbelt skills we gain access to, except for maybe the healing skill. In general, I would recommend AED, which will heal and prevent lethal blows, as its toolbelt skill deals damage and stuns and will benefit from all of our selected traits. In the footage you can see me trying out Elixir H instead, which works just as well but doesn't come with an offensive toolbelt skill. The other utility skills are Photon Wall, Laser Disc and Rifle Turret, as their toolbelt skills will all fire projectiles on relatively short cooldowns, and all of them interact with our chosen traits. Our elite skill is Prime Light Beam, which is a massive death laser, and if you use this when above 50 heat, it becomes a burning death laser. Shortbow skills have a decent range, so when you approach an enemy, try to land a few attacks and supplement their damage with any of the toolbelt skills. And if the target is still alive after, enter Photon Forge to finish them off. In Forge mode, you'll want to use skill 2 for mobility, skill 3 as a close range AoE attack, and skill 4 to shoot targets at range. If you need to stun a target, then skill 5 will do the trick. Getting the most out of your Shortbow will take some time, as each of the different attacks come with a few benefits. As mentioned, the auto attack will inflict vulnerability, while the 4 other abilities will inflict damage, grant us boons or inflict conditions on our enemy, and enable chain reactions, which will all further improve their effects. Since this is an open world build, I tend to use Marauder stats for the extra boost to my HP and Ranger runes to reach 100% critical hit chance while under the effects of Fury. If you don't have a specific open world set, then just use the standard Berserker setup with runes of the Scholar or Dragon Hunter. For sigils, I like Force to increase my overall damage, and since we're trying to burst down enemies as quickly as possible, I prefer using the Sigil of Air in my second slot. If Shortbow turns out to be not your thing, you can keep the same gear and build, but use a rifle instead, which actually works even better. And since I use this build mainly to farm enemies or general content, I prefer using a Relic of Speed to get around faster. But any other that increases either your strike damage or grants some other benefits are fine too. And that's it. Comments and questions down below or on Discord, and like and subscribe before you go.